My mother-in-law called me a gold digger, so I made sure she was there when I inherited more than her son. The accusation came at our wedding reception, whispered loud enough for half the table to hear. "She's only after the family money," Vivian hissed to her sister while I cut cake 20 feet away. Poor Nathaniel doesn't see it, but I do. I'd met Nathaniel in graduate school. Both of us broke, surviving on ramen and student loans. We fell in love over shared textbooks and late-night study sessions in the library. When he proposed with a ring he'd saved 6 months to afford, I said yes because he made me laugh, not because of his trust fund. But Vivian saw my secondhand clothes and assumed I was hunting for wealth. For 3 years, she made her feelings crystal clear. She'd comment on my convenient choice of husband whenever I wore anything new. She'd reminisce about Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, a lawyer from old money who understood their world. At family dinners, she'd discuss inheritance details deliberately, watching my face for signs of greed. When Nathaniel inherits the estate, she'd say, he'll need a wife who appreciates tradition. The irony was delicious. She had no idea my grandmother had been quietly building an empire. While Vivian flaunted her family's modest wealth, my grandmother had started with nothing and accumulated millions through real estate investments. She'd lived simply, driving the same car for 20 years, never mentioning her portfolio. Only I knew about the inheritance because I'd helped manage her finances during her final illness. Every document, every property deed, every investment statement, I'd seen it all. The reading of the will was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. My grandmother's lawyer had specifically requested both families attend. Nathaniel assumed it was a formality, maybe a small bequest for the girl who'd cared for his grandmother-in-law. I smiled and said nothing. That morning, Vivian arrived wearing her best pearls, ready to play the gracious matriarch receiving thanks for her family's charity toward my poor grandmother. She'd even brought her sister as a witness to whatever pittance I might receive. The lawyer began reading. Minor gifts to various charities, small amounts to old friends. Then he reached the main bequest. To my beloved granddaughter, who showed me what family truly means. Vivian's face shifted from polite attention to confusion as the numbers grew. The downtown office building, the apartment complex across the river, the stock portfolio, the vacation properties. When he finished, the room was silent. The total estate value, the lawyer concluded, is approximately $47 million. Nathaniel's inheritance from his family was $2.3 million. Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. Her sister grabbed her arm to steady her. The woman who'd spent years calling me a gold digger had just watched me inherit 20 times more than her precious son would ever see. "I suppose," I said sweetly, "you'll want to revise your guest list for Christmas dinner." But that was just the beginning. Because 3 days later, I discovered something in my grandmother's papers that would change everything we thought we knew about both our family. I was sitting in my grandmother's study, sorting through the last box of personal documents that hadn't been handled by the lawyers. Birth certificates, old photographs, letters tied with ribbon, the kind of sentimental items that don't have monetary value but tell the story of a life. That's when I found the manila envelope marked Vivienne in my grandmother's careful handwriting. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold, property deeds from the 1960s, bank statement, and a letter dated just 3 months before my grandmother's death. The letter was addressed to me, written in the shaky handwriting of her final days. "My dearest granddaughter, if you're reading this, then you've discovered what I've hidden for 60 years. I pray you'll have the wisdom to use this information better than I did. The woman who calls herself Vivian Morrison was born Vivian Kowalski. Her father was my business partner in our first real estate venture. When that deal went bad in 1962, he stole $800,000 from our company and disappeared. I spent decades tracking him down, only to discover he'd died broke in Nevada, leaving his daughter to fend for herself. She changed her name, invented a new history, and married into what she thought was wealth. She has no idea that the very fortune she envies was built partly on what her father stole from me. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so tragic. I've watched her treat you with contempt, never knowing she owes her current lifestyle to money that was rightfully mine. Do with this information what you will. All my love, Grandmama." I read the letter 3 times before the full weight of it hit me. Vivian, who had spent years sneering at my common background, was the daughter of a thief. Her entire social identity was built on lies. And the money she'd inherited through her husband's family, money she claimed made her superior to me, had originally been stolen from my grandmother. But there was more in the envelope. Financial records showing that when Vivian's father disappeared, my grandmother had been left with enormous debts that took her 15 years to pay off. Insurance documents from when her business partner's theft had nearly cost her everything. And most damning of all, a private investigator's report from 1985 detailing exactly how Vivian had systematically reinvented herself after high school. She'd erased every trace of being Vivian Kowalski, created fake references for college applications, even lied about her age, shaving off 2 years to seem more appealing to potential husbands. The woman who'd called me a gold digger was the ultimate gold digger herself. I sat back in my grandmother's leather chair, mind racing. This explained so much about Vivian's behavior. Her desperate need to appear sophisticated, her obsession with bloodlines and breeding, her terror that someone might discover she wasn't what she seemed. She'd been projecting onto me the very crime she'd committed herself, marrying for money while hiding her true background. The question was, What to do with this information? I could have simply filed it away, content with the poetic justice of knowing the truth. But then I remembered every snide comment, every humiliation, every time she'd made me feel small at family gatherings. I thought about how she'd tried to convince Nathaniel that I was unworthy of his love. No, she'd spent 3 years trying to destroy my reputation. It was time she faced the consequences of her own choices. I made copies of everything and stored the originals in my safety deposit box. Then I called my grandmother's private investigator, a woman named Detective Reynolds who specialized in background checks for wealthy families. I need you to verify some information, I told her, and then I need you to compile a comprehensive report. 3 weeks later, Detective Reynolds handed me a folder that was even more damaging than I'd hoped. Not only had she confirmed every detail in my grandmother's documents, but she'd uncovered additional deceptions. Vivian had claimed to attend Vassar, but the college had no record of her. She'd said her family owned a horse farm in Virginia, but no such property had ever existed under either of her names. Even her supposed friendship with various society women was fabricated. Most of them had never heard of her. The woman who'd spent years judging my worthiness had built her entire identity on lies, but I didn't want simple exposure. That felt too easy, too crude. If I was going to end this, it needed to be done with the same precision my grandmother had used to build her empire. I waited for the perfect opportunity. It came 6 weeks later, when Vivian announced she was hosting a charity gala to raise money for the Children's Hospital. It was exactly the kind of event she lived for, a chance to play grand hostess while reminding everyone of her family's generosity and social standing. She'd invited 200 of the city's most prominent citizens. The mayor would be there, 3 city council members, the hospital board of directors, local business leaders, and of course all the society women whose approval she desperately craved. "I hope you'll attend," she told me at Sunday dinner, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "though I understand if you feel out of your depth at such an event." Even after learning about my inheritance, she couldn't help herself. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied. The gala was held at the country club, the same venue where she'd humiliated me at our wedding reception. She'd spared no expense, hiring a full orchestra and having flowers flown in from Portland. The room sparkled with crystal and candlelight, and Vivian floated through it like a queen holding court. She was wearing the family diamonds, a necklace that had belonged to Nathaniel's great-grandmother and was considered a family heirloom. Throughout the cocktail hour, I watched her accept compliments on her excellent breeding and impeccable taste. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. During dinner, Vivian rose to give her speech about the importance of supporting children's health care. She spoke movingly about family legacies and the responsibility of those blessed with wealth to help others. "Some of us," she said, looking directly at me, "understand that true nobility comes from bloodlines, not bank accounts." The room murmured its approval. That's when I stood up. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, "I'd like to add something about family legacies." Vivian's face went white, but she couldn't stop me without causing a scene. "As many of you know," I continued, "I recently inherited my grandmother's estate. What you might not know is that my grandmother left behind more than just property and investments. She left behind truth." I pulled out a single document, the private investigator's summary, formatted to look like a medical report. "This is a genealogical research report commissioned to help the Children's Hospital understand the family histories of its major donors. Since Vivian has been so generous with her contributions, I thought the board members here tonight would be interested in learning about her remarkable family story." Vivian tried to interrupt, but I continued smoothly. "Did you all know that Vivian's real name is Vivian Kowalski? Or that her father was Peter Kowalski, who disappeared in 1962 after embezzling over $800,000 from his business partner, my grandmother?" The room went dead silent. "The private investigator's report is fascinating," I said, handing copies to the nearest tables. "It shows how Vivian completely reinvented herself after high school. New name, new background, even a new birth year. She claimed to attend Vassar, though they have no record of her. She spoke about her family's horse farm in Virginia, though no such property ever existed." As the papers were passed around, people began reading with growing horror and fascination. "The most ironic part," I continued, "is that the wealth she married into, the very foundation of her social standing, was partially built on money her father stole from my family. For 60 years, she's lived off the proceeds of her father's crime while calling other people gold diggers." Vivian finally found her voice. "This is slander!" she shrieked. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually," I said calmly, "I can. Every document has been verified by licensed investigators and is backed up by court records, college transcripts, and property deeds. Or rather, the lack thereof." I turned to address the room. "I'm not sharing this information to embarrass Vivian. Well, not primarily. I'm sharing it because as my grandmother's heir, I feel responsible for addressing the theft that was never prosecuted. The $800,000 that Peter Kowalski stole would be worth approximately $6.2 million today." The room buzzed with whispers as people did the math. "Which is why," I announced, "I'll be making a donation to the Children's Hospital tonight in that exact amount, $6.2 million, to finally put this family debt to rest." The applause that followed was thunderous. Vivian stood frozen in the spotlight, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The society women who'd once deferred to her were whispering behind their programs. The city council members were studying the documents with grim expressions. The hospital board president was already calculating how to distance the institution from the scandal. I'd also like to announce, I continued, that I'm establishing the Meredith Foundation, named after my grandmother, to provide financial support for victims of white-collar crime, because sometimes the damage from theft extends far beyond the original crime. As I sat down, the room erupted in genuine applause. People were standing, approaching my table to congratulate me and offer their support for the foundation. Vivienne remained standing at the podium, abandoned and exposed. Finally, she stumbled from the stage and fled the room, leaving behind her purse, her dignity, and any pretense of social standing. But I wasn't finished with her yet. The next morning brought a deluge of phone calls. Reporters wanted interviews about the family scandal. The district attorney's office called to discuss whether statute of limitations issues prevented prosecution. Social organizations began quietly removing Vivienne from their boards and committees. By noon, 3 different society magazines had called to fact-check stories about the Kowalski deception that would run in their next issues. But the most satisfying call came from Nathaniel. "Is it true?" he asked simply. "Every word," I replied. There was a long pause. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Did you marry me knowing about this? Was this all some elaborate revenge plot?" I could hear the pain in his voice, and my heart broke a little. "Nathaniel," I said softly, "I found out about your mother's background 3 days after my grandmother died, 3 months after we were married. I fell in love with you when we were both broke graduate students, remember? Your mother's lies don't change that." Another pause. "What do you want me to do about this?" "Nothing," I said. "This was between your mother and me. You're not responsible for what she did before you were born. But she's been horrible to you. If I'd known, you would have done exactly what you did do," I interrupted. "You defended our marriage when she tried to break us up. You chose me over her disapproval. That's all I ever needed." That evening, Nathaniel came home looking exhausted. "She's left town," he said. "Packed her bags and left. No forwarding address. She cleaned out her bank accounts and just disappeared. How do you feel about that?" He was quiet for a long time, relieved mostly, and ashamed that I'm relieved. "What kind of son feels relieved when his mother leaves?" "The kind whose mother was toxic," I said gently. "You're not responsible for her choices, past or present. I keep thinking about all the things she said about you, all the ways she tried to make you feel unwelcome. If she knew her own background, she knew," I said. "That's why she was so vicious. She was terrified someone would discover the truth about her, so she attacked first. Classic deflection. Will she come back? I doubt it. Her entire social identity was built here. She can't face the humiliation of staying in a place where everyone knows the truth about her." We were right. Vivienne never returned. 6 months later, we heard through Nathaniel's uncle that she'd moved to Florida and was using her maiden name again, though which maiden name was anyone's guess. She'd apparently told her new neighbors that she was a widow whose ungrateful stepchildren had stolen her inheritance. The lies continued, but at least they were someone else's problem now. The scandal had unexpected benefits. The story of my grandmother's stolen money and my donation to the Children's Hospital generated significant media attention, which brought donors to the Meredith Foundation from across the country. Within a year, we'd raised enough money to help over 300 families who'd been victims of financial fraud. More importantly, the truth about Vivienne's background seemed to inspire other people to share their own stories about toxic family members who'd hidden behind false respectability. I received hundreds of letters from people who'd been manipulated, gaslighted, or abused by relatives who presented perfect facades to the outside world. One letter particularly moved me. It was from a woman named Clara, whose sister had spent years borrowing money from family members while claiming to be a successful entrepreneur. In reality, she'd been using the funds to support a gambling addiction while living in a fantasy world of her own creation. "Your story gave me the courage to finally tell the truth about what she'd done to our family," Clara wrote. "For years, I protected her reputation because I thought that's what family was supposed to do. But reading about how you handled your mother-in-law made me realize that protecting the truth is more important than protecting lies." These responses reminded me why my grandmother had kept those documents all those years. She'd understood that sometimes the truth needs to wait for the right moment, the right person, the right opportunity to create change rather than just destruction. A year after the gala, Nathaniel and I were finally able to have a normal relationship with his father's side of the family. Without Vivienne's constant manipulation and poison, family gatherings became genuinely enjoyable. His cousins admitted they'd never liked her, but had felt obligated to be polite. His uncle confessed that he'd always suspected she was lying about her background, but hadn't wanted to investigate. "The signs were there," he told me. "She knew too little about the time periods she claimed to have lived through. Her stories never quite lined up. But confronting her would have meant confronting the fact that we'd all been fooled." It was a reminder that Vivienne hadn't just deceived herself. She'd built a web of complicity around her lies, making everyone who'd accepted her false story a participant in the deception. The most healing moment came 2 years after the scandal, when I received a letter from the director of the Children's Hospital. "Your donation has allowed us to open a new wing dedicated to treating children from low-income families," she wrote. "We've named it the Meredith Family Center, in honor of your grandmother's legacy, Every day, children receive life-saving care because of what your family's truth made possible. I thought about my grandmother, who'd spent 60 years carrying the burden of what had been stolen from her. She'd used that pain to fuel her determination to build something better, to create wealth that could serve a purpose beyond just accumulating more wealth. In the end, Vivian's theft, both her father's original crime and her own theft of truth and dignity, had been transformed into something that saved lives. That seemed like the kind of justice my grandmother would have appreciated. 3 years later, I was pregnant with our first child, and Nathaniel and I were discussing what to name her. "What about Meredith?" he suggested. "After your grandmother." I considered it. Actually, I was thinking about that, but maybe something that honors what she taught me instead of just who she was. What do you mean? She taught me that the truth has power, even when it takes decades to reveal itself. That patience and preparation matter more than immediate revenge. That sometimes the best way to handle toxic people is to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Okay, but how does that translate into a name? I smiled. What about Veritas? It means truth in Latin, and it sounds enough like a normal name that she won't be stuck explaining it her whole life. Veritas Morrison, he said slowly. I like it. Strong name for a strong girl. With a grandmother's fortune and a family history of taking down people who think they're untouchable, I added. Speaking of which, Nathaniel said, I have news about my mother. My eyebrows raised. We hadn't heard anything about Vivian since she'd fled to Florida. The private investigator called. Apparently, she tried to pull the same con in Naples, claimed to be a wealthy widow from an old Charleston family. She even found a new target, a widower who owns a chain of luxury car dealerships. Let me guess. Someone figured out she was lying? His daughter-in-law is a genealogist who specializes in family histories for estate planning. She got suspicious when my mother couldn't provide any specific details about her supposed family history and started investigating. What did she find? Everything. The whole Peter Kowalski story, the name change, even news articles about the Gala scandal. Turns out lying about your identity is significantly harder in the internet age. What happened to her? The man called off their engagement and asked her to leave his house immediately. But here's the interesting part. His daughter-in-law said my mother wasn't even embarrassed. She just packed her bags and said she'd find somewhere that appreciated a woman of quality. I shook my head, still living in her fantasy world. Apparently, but her new story is that she's a victim of financial fraud committed by her cruel stepchildren. She's telling people we somehow stole her rightful inheritance. Of course she is. People like your mother never accept responsibility for their own choices. There's always someone else to blame. Do you think we should warn people about her? Let them know what she's really like? I thought about it. No. The truth about people like Vivian always comes out eventually. She'll keep lying, keep trying to con people, and eventually she'll target someone who won't be fooled. The internet makes it almost impossible to completely erase your past anymore. So we just let her keep hurting people? We let her keep exposing herself. Every lie she tells makes her more vulnerable to discovery. Every con she attempts leaves more evidence. She's her own worst enemy. We don't need to do anything except let her be herself. It was true. Within 6 months, we heard that Vivian had tried and failed to infiltrate 3 different social circles in Florida. Each time, someone had done a basic internet search and found the news articles about her scandal. Each time, she'd been quietly disinvited from events and excluded from social groups. The final report came from the private investigator a year later. She's moved to Arizona, Detective Reynolds told me. Small town outside Phoenix. She's using a completely different name now. Victoria Morrison. Claims to be a retired art dealer from San Francisco. Any new victims? She's been trying to join the local historical society and garden club, but she hasn't managed to hook anyone financially. I think she's running low on resources. The lifestyle she's used to requires money, and she doesn't have the skills to earn it legitimately. Will you keep monitoring her? For now. But honestly, I think she's becoming irrelevant. She's in her 70s, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and telling increasingly desperate lies to people who don't have the kind of money she's used to targeting. She's more pathetic than dangerous at this point. That was the last I heard about Vivian, or Victoria, or whoever she was calling herself. But the impact of standing up to her continued to ripple through my life in positive ways. The Meredith Foundation had grown into a nationally recognized organization that helped victims of financial fraud navigate legal and financial recovery. We'd helped over 1,000 families and had inspired similar organizations in 12 other states. More personally, the experience had taught me something crucial about dealing with toxic people. The best defense against manipulation is truth, preparation, and patience. Vivian had counted on my being too polite, too shocked, or too intimidated to fight back effectively. She'd miscalculated. When Veritas was born, I looked into her tiny face and made a promise. You'll always know the truth about your family, I whispered. The good, the bad, and the complicated. No lies, no pretenses, no family secrets that could be used against you later. Because that's what my grandmother had really left me. Not just money, but the understanding that truth is the most valuable inheritance of all. And unlike money, truth can't be stolen, squandered, or lost. It can only be ignored, hidden, or distorted. But it never disappears entirely. It waits, patient and persistent, for the right moment to reveal itself. And when it does, It has the power to change everything. 5 years later, I received one final piece of correspondence related to the Vivian saga. It was a death certificate, forwarded by the private investigator. Vivian, under whatever name she'd been using, had died in a Phoenix hospital. No family had claimed the body. Her possessions fit in 2 cardboard boxes, and her bank account contained $247. The woman who'd spent her entire life chasing wealth and social status had died alone and poor. Her identity so fractured by lies that even the coroner had trouble determining her real name. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I felt no satisfaction in her death, only sadness for a life wasted on deception and bitterness. That evening, I told Nathaniel about the death certificate. "How do you feel about it?" he asked. "Empty, mostly." She never figured out how to be happy with the truth of who she was. She spent 70-some years running from herself. Do you regret exposing her? I thought about it carefully. No, but not because she deserved to be humiliated, because she needed to be stopped. She was hurting people, including you, and sometimes the only way to stop someone who's committed to lying is to make the truth impossible to ignore. Would you do it again? I'd try to find a way that didn't require public humiliation first. But if that didn't work, yes, truth matters more than comfort. That night, I went into Veritas's room and watched her sleep. She was 4 years old now, full of questions about everything, unafraid to speak her mind, completely confident in her place in the world. She would never have to wonder if her family loved her for who she was or what she represented. She would never have to hide parts of herself to be accepted. She would grow up knowing that honesty, even when it's difficult, is always better than lies, even when they're comfortable. And if someone ever tried to manipulate her the way Vivian had tried to manipulate me, she'd have the tools to recognize it and the strength to fight back. That seemed like the most valuable inheritance I could give her. The truth, the whole truth, and the confidence to use it wisely. Because in the end, that's what my grandmother had really given me. Not just money, but the understanding that financial wealth means nothing without the integrity to use it well. And the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything the person who hurt you could never be. Honest, generous, strong enough to build instead of destroy, and secure enough in your own truth that other people's lies can't touch you. I closed Veritas's door softly and went to find Nathaniel. We had a future to build, and for the first time in years, we could build it without looking over our shoulders for the shadow of someone else's deception. The truth had set us free, and freedom, it turned out, was worth more than any inheritance.